Her voice cut through the quiet like glass breaking. "Mom," she said, staring at me with cold eyes, "you don't deserve anything." For a moment, even the old clock in the corner seemed to stop ticking. The whole room shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared to speak. My throat tightened. My own daughter, the little girl I once carried, fed, and stayed up all night with when she was sick, looked at me as if I were a thief who had stolen her life away. I wanted to say something, to remind her of the nights I worked myself to the bone just to keep food on the table, of the sacrifices I made when bills piled higher than our pantry shelves. But my lips wouldn't move. In that moment, all those years of love and effort felt invisible, erased by one cruel sentence. She sat tall, her chin raised with the same proud look her father used to carry, only hers was hardened by years of anger. To her, I wasn't her mother. I was the problem, the cause of everything she believed had gone wrong. And so, I stayed silent. The lawyer cleared his throat, pushing his glasses up his nose, clearly rattled by her words. "If we could continue," he said softly. He glanced at me with a flicker of sympathy before lowering his eyes back to the stack of papers, the will of my late husband, the man who once held this family together. He had been gone for months now, taken far too soon. And with him had gone the only bridge between me and Emily. Without him, nothing stood between her anger and me. I stared at those papers, knowing they carried his final words. My daughter sat stiff, arms crossed, waiting for proof that she was right, that everything belonged to her, that her bitterness was justified, and that I would be left with nothing. She was so sure, but she didn't know what was on that last page. None of them did. The morning after the will reading, I sat alone at the old wooden table in my kitchen. Sunlight spilling through the lace curtains. My coffee had gone cold in my hands. The house felt too big now, every corner echoing with his absence. 6 months had passed since my husband died, yet I still caught myself listening for his footsteps in the hallway, or the low hum of his voice on the phone. Grief had settled into my life like an unwanted guest that refused to leave. But when Emily was around, it wasn't just grief I felt, it was shame. Emily, my 35-year-old daughter, was sharp, successful, and confident, the kind of woman people paid attention to. But with me, that confidence turned into judgment. To her, I was weak, a failure as both a wife and a mother. Maybe in her eyes, I could still remember when that wall between us first started to build. She was 16 and furious at me for selling the small lake cabin her father had loved. She never understood I had done it to keep us afloat, to pay for her schooling, to keep a roof over our heads. She only saw what I took away, not what I saved. From then on, she seemed to keep a mental list of my mistakes, each one written in permanent ink. Her father had always softened her anger, reminded her of my worth when she doubted me. He was the bridge that kept us connected. When death took him, that bridge collapsed, leaving us stranded on opposite sides. My son Daniel was different, 6 years younger, gentle where Emily was sharp. He loved books more than boardrooms. He never judged me. He simply stayed close, steady in his quiet way. I knew he would come to the will reading, even if he wasn't there yet. He always came, but my heart still ached most for Emily, because beneath her anger, I could still see the little girl she used to be, the one who held my hand tightly when we crossed busy streets, the one who giggled with me in the kitchen while baking cookies, the one who buried her face in my blouse, crying about monsters under the bed. Once, I was her safe place, and in my heart, I wished I still could be. I used to be her home, but somewhere along the way, what once felt safe to her started to feel like a cage, and home became a place she wanted to escape. That morning in the kitchen, memories weighed on me like shadows I couldn't push away. I thought about the nights I worked 2 jobs while her father was out of work, about skipping meals so the kids could eat, about the whispered prayers in the dark when I wasn't sure how we'd make it to the next week. But none of that mattered to Emily anymore. All she could see were the scars, not the love behind them. The buzz of my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. A message from Daniel lit up the screen. "On my way, Mom. Don't worry. It'll be okay." I wanted to believe him, but how could it be okay? We were walking into the lawyer's office to hear my husband's final words, words that could heal or destroy what little was left between me and my daughter. And Emily, oh Emily, she was already ready to turn those words into a weapon. I could picture her sitting there, arms crossed, chin high, staring at me with that fire in her eyes, waiting for the proof that I was unworthy. The world saw Emily's success, the sharp suits, polished shoes, the air of control, but I saw the little girl still buried inside, hurting and angry, hiding behind walls I no longer had the strength to climb. The sound of a car pulling up broke my thoughts. Daniel stepped out, his gentle smile easing the storm in my chest. He hugged me like I was something fragile, and for a moment I let myself lean into his comfort. "Mom," he whispered, "whatever happens in there, Dad loved you. Don't forget that." I nodded, though my throat ached. I wanted so badly to believe him. The drive to the lawyer's office passed in a blur. My mind swung between fear and longing, fear of Emily's cutting words, longing for just one more moment with my husband to stand between us, reminding her of who I really was. But he wasn't here. All I had left were the words he put in that will, and I knew once they were read, nothing would ever be the same. Emily, meanwhile, was preparing herself like it was battle. She adjusted her blazer sleeve, checked her lipstick, made sure not a hair was out of place. To her, this wasn't just another meeting, it was the moment she had been waiting for. To her, the will was proof, justice, her father's final confirmation that she had always been right about me. Her heart, though, wasn't as steady as her appearance. Inside, her emotions crashed like storm clouds, sadness, and the sharp thrill of being vindicated. She thought about the cabin I had sold, about every argument she overheard, about every choice she decided was selfish or reckless. To her, my sacrifices were just excuses. Her father had been her anchor, the one who believed in her dreams. When he died, she lost her tether to love and understanding. And all that was left was me and a resentment that only grew deeper with time. When she parked outside the lawyer's office, she smoothed her skirt and stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement like a drumbeat. She walked in polished, untouchable, the picture of success, but beneath that mask, her heart pounded. The office smelled of leather and old books, the kind of place that carried weight and authority. She sat waiting, the ticking clock on the wall matching her racing pulse. She remembered her father's weak voice in his final days. "Take care of your mother." She had nodded then, but she hadn't meant it. Why should she? In her mind, her mother didn't deserve it. The door opened, and Emily's jaw tightened as she saw Daniel walk in, our mother beside him. Daniel, always the gentle one, greeted Emily with a warm smile. She gave him only a quick, stiff nod. Their mother didn't look at Emily at all, her eyes fixed elsewhere, as if even glancing at her daughter's disappointment would be too heavy to carry. The lawyer, Mr. Harris, appeared then. He was in his late 50s, calm and steady, with a voice that carried authority without trying. His gray suit was sharp, his eyes kind but distant, the way professionals often are when emotions run high. "Please, take your seats," he said, gesturing to the long, polished table stacked with folders. Emily sat directly across from her mother. The table between them felt like a wall, wood and paper standing in for years of hurt. Daniel sat off to the side, hands folded tightly, his eyes bouncing nervously between them, as though waiting for the storm to hit. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses and spoke softly but firmly. "Your father's will is not only about dividing assets, it is also a record of his final wishes." Emily lifted her chin. She was ready to hear the validation she had waited years for, ready to watch her mother's face crumble when the truth came out. Her mother, however, sat quietly with her hands folded, eyes lowered, no fight left in her. That quietness only fueled Emily's determination. The lawyer opened the folder, the sound of paper rustling loud in the still room. "We will proceed line by line," he explained. Emily's heart raced. This was the moment she had replayed in her head so many times, the moment she finally won. She fixed her gaze on her mother, daring her to look up. The will began with formalities, debts, funeral costs, donations to charities her father had supported. Emily grew impatient. None of that mattered. What mattered was what came next. And then the words she had been waiting for. "To my beloved daughter, Emily." Her heart leaped, victory already rising in her chest. She glanced at her mother, chin high, eyes sharp. "This is it," she thought. "I leave to you my collection of rare books, which I know you admired as a child. May they remind you of our shared love for learning and the hours we spent together in the study." Emily froze. Books, just the books. For a moment, her face faltered, but she quickly forced a smile, trying to mask her disappointment. Inside, frustration simmered. This isn't enough. This can't be all. Still, she reassured herself there was more to come. Mr. Harris moved on. "To my son Daniel, I leave my music collection, including the piano that has been in our family for generations. May it bring you comfort and joy. And may you continue the music tradition that was so dear to my heart." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, whispering softly, "Thank you, Dad." though his father was no longer there to hear. Emily glanced at him, annoyance flashing in her eyes. Daniel was always content with little things, but not her. She wanted more. She deserved more. Finally, Mr. Harris turned to their mother. The air in the room grew heavy. Emily leaned forward, smirk tugging at her lips, certain her mother would be left with scraps. To my wife, Margaret, the lawyer read. Emily's smirk deepened. Here it comes, she thought. I leave the family home, with all its contents. May it remain a place of comfort for you in your remaining years. The words landed like a stone in Emily's chest. The air in the room shifted. Emily's smirk slipped away, replaced by shock. The family home, that was everything, the heart of their father's estate. Her eyes darted to her mother, whose face stayed still, though her hands trembled slightly in her lap. No, Emily blurted, her voice sharp. That's not right. Mr. Harris looked up from the page, eyebrows raised. These are your father's words, Miss Matthews. His decision? Emily shook her head furiously. He wouldn't do that. Not after everything. Not after the way she. Her words faltered, trembling with anger. Daniel shifted uneasily, his hand tightening on his mother's arm. Emily, maybe we should just listen. Listen, she snapped, whirling toward him. To what? Lies. To her sitting there pretending she deserves any of this. Her words cut the air like lightning. Their mother flinched, but said nothing. Silence had long been her only shield. Emily's chest heaved, her anger threatening to spill over. She wanted to scream, to rip the papers from the lawyer's hands, to prove her father would never betray her like this. But Mr. Harris only adjusted his glasses and kept reading. There is more, he said evenly. The room settled again, though the tension was unbearable. Emily leaned back in her chair, arms crossed tightly, fury burning just beneath her skin. Daniel's eyes flicked nervously between them. Their mother kept her gaze lowered, her silence heavy but unbroken. Mr. Harris went on about smaller gifts, bequests to cousins, a scholarship fund, instructions for investments. Emily barely heard him. Her mind boiled with rage. She had walked in expecting victory, but instead it felt like her father had turned his back on her memory, giving the one thing of true value to the woman she despised most. Her own words echoed in her head. You don't deserve anything. And yet, here it was in black and white, the opposite. Emily leaned forward again, her voice low but dripping with venom. This isn't over. For the first time that day, her mother lifted her eyes. Her expression was worn, pained, but steady. A quiet strength glimmered through the sorrow. For a brief moment, Emily felt something unsettling stir inside her, a flicker of doubt she didn't want to name. The lawyer turned another page, the rustle of paper cutting through the silence. His voice stayed calm, steady against the storm in the room. This is a joke, Emily snapped, pushing her chair back with a screech against the wooden floor. He couldn't have meant this. The house, after everything she's done, he leaves her the house. Her mother flinched again, lips parting, as if to speak, but no words came. Daniel looked torn apart, his eyes bouncing between his sister and mother. Emily, he tried softly. Maybe we should. Don't she cut him off? Her voice shaking with fury. Don't defend her. You have no idea what it was like, watching her ruin everything Dad worked for. Do you remember the cabin? Do you? Her voice cracked with rage. He loved that place, and she sold it like it was nothing. And you expect me to believe he wanted her to have the house? At last, her mother spoke, her voice trembling but clear. Emily, I sold the cabin because we needed the money. Your father had lost his job. The bills were drowning us. It was the only way I knew to keep you in school. Emily's laugh was sharp and bitter. Oh, here it comes again, the martyr act. Always a sacrifice, always an excuse. But you never asked us. You never asked him. You just did whatever you wanted, and we had to live with it. Tears brimmed in her mother's eyes, but she blinked them away. Her voice was quiet, but firm. I did what I thought was right, what I had to do for this family. Emily slammed her hand against the table, making Daniel jump. No, you did what was easiest for you. You never cared what Dad wanted. You never cared what I wanted. And now you sit there pretending to deserve his home, his legacy. You don't. You never did. The words dropped heavy, sharper than knives. Daniel's face twisted with pain. Emily, that's not fair. You can't fair. She spun on him, her voice breaking. What's fair about watching him work his whole life for that house, only for it to go to her? What's fair about me carrying this family's name with pride? While her voice caught, the cracks in her armor showing for the first time, her eyes shimmered with tears, and she turned her face away before they could fall. Her mother's voice broke the silence. barely more than a whisper. You think I don't know what I've done wrong. You think I don't carry those mistakes every day. I never claimed to be perfect, Emily, but I loved you. I loved your father. I still do. Emily's laugh was hollow, bitter. Love. If this is your idea of love, then no wonder Dad never. She stopped herself, biting back the words before they crossed a line even she couldn't face. Mr. Harris cleared his throat softly, easing the tension. There is still more to be read. Perhaps we should continue. Emily waved a hand, her chest heaving. Fine, read it. Let's hear the rest of the lies. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, but she shook it off. His eyes drifted to their mother, whose hands now trembled openly in her lap. The lawyer leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Your father's will is layered. It contains instructions beyond the division of property. It's important you hear everything in full. Emily rolled her eyes. Of course, always more riddles. But her voice no longer carried the same fire. Beneath the anger, unease was growing. Their mother sat straighter, eyes fixed on the lawyer, as if holding on to whatever hope the next words might bring. Mr. Harris paused deliberately. This section explains his reasoning, his hopes for each of you, and his final message. Emily stiffened, jaw tight. Explanations. She wasn't sure she wanted those. Explanations could mean truths she had spent her whole life avoiding. Her mother's breath caught, so faint that only Daniel noticed. He leaned toward her. Mom, he whispered. She shook her head quickly. It's nothing. Just listen. Emily crossed her arms, hiding her racing heart behind a mask of disdain. What could her father have written that needed this much build-up? Mr. Harris rested his hand on the stack of papers, steady but deliberate. He hadn't yet turned the page. Emily's eyes narrowed. What is it? What's on that page? The lawyer met her gaze. Something your father wanted revealed only after everything else was said. Emily leaned forward, breath shallow. For the first time that day, she felt something unexpected. Not anger, not triumph, but fear. The silence thickened. The only sounds were the faint hum of the air conditioner and their uneven breaths. Emily's nails dug into her blazer as her pulse raced. She hated feeling afraid of what came next. Her mother sat still, though Daniel noticed her shoulders tremble as if each breath was a battle. He reached for her hand again. This time, she let him. Mr. Harris tapped the edge of the papers. Your father's final message was meant to be read once, after the division of his possessions. He asked that it be done this way, and no other. Emily scoffed, her voice sharp but unsteady. Always the dramatics. Even from the grave. Her mother's eyes flicked toward her, pain breaking through her calm. She wanted to speak, to defend her husband's intentions, but Emily spoke first, her voice rising. He left her the house. He left Daniel the piano, and me. What did I get? Books, dusty shelves of books. Her bitter laugh rang too loudly in the room. Do you know how humiliating this is? All my life I tried to prove I was the one he could count on, and this is what I get. Pages and ink. Her mother's voice was fragile but steady. Emily, those books were his heart. He read them with you. He saved them because they reminded him of you. They weren't nothing. Emily's head snapped toward her, fury burning in her eyes. Don't you dare tell me what he thought of me. Don't pretend you know what it meant to him. You never understood me, and you never understood him. The venom in her tone cut deep. A single tear slipped down her mother's cheek before she quickly brushed it away, ashamed to show weakness. Daniel's voice broke through, soft but firm. Enough, Emily. You're not the only one who lost him. We all did. Stop acting like your grief is the only one that matters. Emily turned on him, eyes blazing, but the words caught in her throat. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, silent at last. For a moment, Emily's mask cracked. Behind her anger was something else, regret, maybe even shame, but she buried it quickly, straightening her shoulders. Her mother leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Memories pressed against her late nights, whispering with Richard about protecting their children. Choices that made her seem cold. Sacrifices Emily never understood. She had carried them in silence for years. Now, accused of selfishness by the very child she thought she had saved, the weight was almost unbearable. Emily, she whispered, her voice breaking, you'll never know how much I gave up for you, and maybe you'll never care. But your father knew. He always knew. Emily's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. Her eyes fell to the polished table, where her faint reflection stared back. For a brief second, she looked less like the sharp, untouchable woman she pretended to be, and more like the girl who once clung to her father's arm. The room held its breath. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. Shall I continue? Emily swallowed hard. Fine, read it. The lawyer adjusted the papers, pausing at the last sheet. He studied them all, his expression softening. "This final page," he said gently, "is not about possessions. It is about truth." Daniel leaned forward, heart pounding. Their mother laced her trembling hands together, bracing for the words she both longed for and feared. Emily sat stiffly, eyes wide despite her defiance. For the first time, she realized these words could shatter everything she believed. Mr. Harris let the silence hang before speaking. "Your father wanted these words to be the last thing you heard from him." The paper crackled as he turned the page. The sound filled the room, louder than Emily's accusations, louder than her mother's defenses. Every eye fixed on him as he held the final sheet with reverence. He cleared his throat and began, "To my family, if you are hearing this, it means I am no longer with you. Though I cannot hold your hands or speak aloud, I pray these words will carry my heart to you." Emily's breath caught. In her mind, she heard his voice, deep, steady, the voice that had anchored her all her life. "First, to my daughter Emily," Harris read, "you have always been determined, ambitious, a fire I recognized from my own youth. I admired it, even when it set you against others. You longed for the world to see you, but Emily always saw you." Her hands curled into fists, her throat tight. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Her father's words pressed deeper. "Do you remember the nights in the study, reading together by the fire? You devoured books not for the stories, but because you needed me. I knew that, and I cherished it. That is why I left them to you not as scraps, but as proof that you were the one who demanded my time and attention, and I gave it gladly. Those books are not mere pages, they are my life with you, preserved." Emily's breath shuddered. The books she had dismissed them as nothing, but now, hearing them through his words, they carried a weight she could hardly bear. Mr. Harris paused, glancing at her. For once, Emily didn't glare back. She looked away, jaw tight, chest rising unevenly. Her mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling freely. To her, those words were not only about Emily, but also proof of a bond she had long feared was lost. The lawyer continued, "To my son Daniel, my gentle boy, my music, you carried a tenderness that reminded me of your mother, and I was grateful for it. Where your sister fought to be heard, you listened. Where she demanded, you gave. The piano is yours, son, because I know you will fill our home with warmth long after I am gone." Daniel's tears flowed as he bowed his head. "I'll make you proud, Dad," he whispered. Emily's chest tightened at the sound of his sincerity. Jealousy pricked at Emily, not because Daniel had been given the piano, but because his pain seemed pure, while hers felt heavy and poisoned. Then came the words everyone had been waiting for. The lawyer read aloud, "To my beloved wife, Margaret, no treasure could ever repay what you gave me. You gave up pieces of yourself quietly, so we could all survive. The world may never know how much you carried, but I did. I leave you our home, not as a gift, but because you built it, held it together, and filled it with love, even when no one understood you." Margaret's tears finally broke free, her chest shaking with quiet sobs. She had lived her whole life in silence, carrying burdens no one saw, and now hearing them spoken out loud almost crushed her. Emily's face twisted in confusion. She wanted to deny the words, to dismiss them as lies, but they cut too close to a truth she had ignored. Her father hadn't just noticed her mother, he had honored her. The lawyer's voice grew gentler, but stronger. "To my children, I know you've seen your mother's flaws, as I have. But remember, every mistake she made was born from survival. She carried weights so you wouldn't have to. If you inherit anything from me, let it be the knowledge that your mother is the foundation of this family. Without her, none of this would exist." Emily's defenses crumbled, her lips trembled, and though she pressed her hands tightly together, she couldn't stop the tear that slid down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily, embarrassed, but another followed right after. Margaret, still trembling, looked at her daughter, not asking to win, but begging to be understood. The lawyer hesitated, then read the final lines. "If you ever doubt your mother's worth, remember this: everything you have, everything you are, exists because of her. Honor her, not because she is perfect, but because she is the reason you stand where you do today." The words hit like thunder rolling through the room. Emily's face crumpled, the bitterness she'd carried for years colliding with the truth she could no longer deny. The inheritance, the house, the things, it was never about possessions. It was about love, sacrifice, and truths she had refused to see. Her chest ached as if her father had reached across time to place both his love and his disappointment on her shoulders. For once, Emily had no words, The room felt suffocating. Emily sat frozen pale, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her voice, the sharp, unshakable voice she always carried, had abandoned her. Daniel leaned forward, wanting to shake her free of her anger, but he knew this wasn't his moment. This was between Emily and their mother. At last, Margaret broke the silence. Her voice was soft, fragile, but steady. Emily, I never wanted you to feel unloved. Everything I did, every choice I made, it was for you. For both of you. Emily snapped her head toward her, anger flickering again, but weaker this time. For me, she said, her voice cracking. You call it love. I call it neglect. You sold everything Dad cared about. You turned our lives upside down. And you dare say that was for me. Margaret flinched as more tears streamed down her face. Shaking her head, she whispered, I sold the cabin to keep you in school. I skipped meals so you could eat. I wore the same shoes for years while you had new ones each season. You never saw it, Emily, but your father did. That's why he wrote those words. Emily slammed her hand on the table, though it no longer had its old force. You never told me. You never explained. All I saw was a woman making decisions and leaving us to deal with them. Her voice broke. She pressed her fist against her mouth, trying to hold back the sobs threatening to escape. Daniel's eyes softened. He had known some of their mother's struggles, had seen hints of her sacrifice, but hearing it spelled out in their father's will made guilt swell inside him too. Margaret reached out with a trembling hand. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to carry that burden. I wanted you free to dream, to succeed. If you hated me for it, then so be it. But I couldn't let you see how hard it really was. Emily jerked back, shaking her head furiously. No, you don't get to act like some saint. You don't get to hide behind sacrifice when you never once told me you were proud of me. Never once told me I was enough. Margaret felt her daughter's words cut deep, like a knife. Her hand dropped to her side, and her shoulders sagged. Oh, Emily, she whispered, her voice breaking, I thought you knew. Emily's tears finally spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head. I didn't. All I ever saw was silence. All I saw was you erasing the things Dad loved and replacing them with your choices. And I hated you for it. I still, her voice cracked, choking on the word, I still do. The admission hung in the air like a heavy stone. Daniel lowered his eyes, unable to watch the pain twisting his sister's face. Margaret's tears came harder now. If hating me kept you strong, then I'll accept it. But you must believe me, Emily. I never stopped loving you, even when you pulled away, even when your eyes burned with anger. I loved you every single second, and I will keep loving you, whether you want me to or not. Emily pressed her hands to her face, sobs shaking her body, raw and uncontrollable. The sharp, confident woman who had walked into the office was gone. What sat there now was a grieving daughter, hurting, desperate for the father she had lost and the mother she had pushed away. Her words came muffled through her hands. Why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you show me? I thought Dad was the only one who ever believed in me. Margaret's heart broke. She pushed herself slowly out of her chair, her legs trembling, and walked around the table. Daniel held his breath, watching. Standing beside her sobbing daughter, Margaret whispered, I did fight for you. You just never saw the battlefield. Every bill I paid, every choice I made, it was a war for you. And I'd do it all again. She hesitated, then gently placed her hand on Emily's shoulder. This time, Emily didn't pull away. Her sobs grew quieter, though her body still shook. She lowered her hands, her swollen eyes meeting her mother's, not with anger, but with something softer. I don't know if I can forgive you, she whispered. Margaret nodded slowly, her own tears still falling. Then don't. Not yet. Just let me try again. Emily's lips trembled, but for once she didn't argue. The lawyer, who had been silent, carefully folded the papers in front of him. Your father's will was never about money, he said gently. It was about truth, about healing what's been broken. The room fell into silence. The three of them sat at the table, surrounded by broken pieces of their family. But for the first time, those cracks didn't feel like wounds. They felt like tiny openings, places where forgiveness could start to seep in. The office was quiet, almost as if the walls themselves didn't want to disturb the fragile moment. The papers sat neatly stacked, but their words hung in the air like echoes that would never fade. Emily slumped in her chair, her face blotched with tears, her polished composure gone. For the first time in years, she looked less like the commanding woman who conquered boardrooms and more like the little girl who once ran crying into her father's arms after scraping her knee. Margaret stayed by her side, her hand still resting gently on her daughter's shoulder. She didn't press for more. She didn't beg for forgiveness or demand answers. She simply stayed quiet, steady, and present. Daniel finally let out a long breath, as if he had been holding it through the entire storm. He glanced at Mr. Harris, who gave a small nod and stood. "I'll give you a moment," the lawyer said softly, closing the door behind him. The silence that followed was different now, not heavy with anger, but fragile, like something newborn struggling to survive. Emily finally lifted her head, her voice still rough from crying. "I don't know how to fix this." Her mother turned toward, her eyes swollen but kind. "Neither do I. Maybe we don't have to fix everything today. Maybe we just start." Emily shook her head, guilt pressing down with every word. "I said things I can't take back, things that—" Her voice cracked, and she covered her mouth. Margaret leaned closer, her voice steady despite her tears. "I've made mistakes too, in silence, in choices. We can't change the past, Emily. All we have is now, and right now, I just want to be your mother again, if you'll let me." The words cracked something open in Emily's heart. For so long, she had worn her anger like armor, believing it kept her safe. But now she realized that Alma had only wounded her more deeply. Tears streamed down her face again. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," she whispered. Margaret's lips curved into the faintest, trembling smile. "Then don't. Not yet. Just let me show you I'm still here." For the first time that day, Emily didn't fight back. She didn't argue. She just let the words sink in. Her heart still hurt, but inside her, the tiniest spark flickered something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Daniel reached across the table, placing his hand gently over both of theirs. His voice was quiet, but certain. "Then, maybe this is where we begin. Dad wanted us to heal," Daniel said softly. "Maybe that's the only inheritance that really matters." Margaret's eyes filled again, but this time her tears carried hope instead of despair. Emily looked at her brother, then at her mother. She couldn't bring herself to speak, but she gave the smallest nod. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. The weeks after the will reading passed slowly, like winter giving way to spring. Nothing changed overnight. There were no big speeches, no magical fixes for old wounds. But small things, tiny, almost hidden, began to take root. Emily started calling again. At first, it was nothing more than a stiff check-in. A few words about work, then an awkward "how are you?" followed by silence. Margaret didn't fill the gaps with apologies or excuses. She simply answered, "I'm fine. How are you, sweetheart?" And though the conversations ended quickly, they began to happen more often. Daniel quietly became the glue holding them together. He invited them both to dinner, even though the air was still heavy with tension. Slowly, the sharp edges softened. One evening, Margaret brought a dish Emily had loved as a child. She didn't say it was on purpose, but Emily noticed. She ate quietly, blinking back tears, and for the first time in years whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Margaret excused herself to the kitchen, and Daniel saw her press a hand to her lips, hiding a trembling smile. Another day, Emily stopped by her mother's house, their house now. She wandered into her father's study, scanning the shelves of books he had left her. Dust coated the spines, but when she pulled one down, she found his handwriting in the margins, little notes, reminders of talks they'd had, even questions meant for her. She sat in his old chair and read for hours. Margaret peeked in once, saw her there, and quietly closed the door, letting her daughter sit with the past in her own way. The piano became a bridge to Daniel often visited to plea, filling the rooms with music when words failed. One Sunday, Emily sat beside him and hummed along to one of their father's favorite songs. Her voice shook, but Margaret listened from the hallway, her heart swelling with a hope she hadn't felt in years, the sound of her children together again. Of course, there were still arguments. Old wounds don't disappear, so Emily still bristled at certain memories, and Margaret still carried guilt too heavy to let go. But little by little, resentment began to give way to moments of grace. One night, sitting together in the living room, Margaret finally said what had weighed on her heart for decades. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Emily, but I hope, when you think of me, you'll remember at least one thing I did right." Emily traced the rim of her teacup, meeting her mother's gaze. Her voice was soft, unsure, but honest. "I'm here, aren't I? That has to mean something." It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but it was a seed, planted in soil they had once thought barren. In the end, the will hadn't divided them. It had forced them to face truths they'd buried, to finally hear the words left unspoken. Richard's last gift wasn't the house, or the books, or even the piano. His gift was giving his family the chance to begin again, and though their journey was far from over, for the first time in years, they faced it not as enemies, but as family. Sometimes, the words we keep inside hurt more than the ones we say out loud. Emily believed her mother had failed her. Margaret believed her daughter would never see her sacrifices. Both carried years of silence until Richard's final words pushed them to face each other honestly. Maybe you see yourself in Emily, angry at someone you love, holding on to bitterness that feels impossible to let go. Or maybe you see yourself in Margaret, carrying the weight of choices no one understood, hoping one day your love will be seen. The truth is, we rarely understand the full story of another person's sacrifices until it's too late. Richard's will was more than a legal paper. It was a reminder that love often hides in silence, waiting for the right moment to be seen. So, before your own story ends, take a moment, call the person you've been avoiding, say the words you've been holding back. Forgiveness doesn't have to happen all at once, but beginnings matter. That's today's story. If it touched you, leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget, share your own life lesson in the comments below.